Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to another viewers requested videos. This is now a regular Wednesday feature until I run out of viewers requests. At the moment I've got stacks and an odd one is still coming in now and again, which I just add to the list. The list is now quite long, it takes us well into next year, even though we're doing them every week. So yes, so this comes up every year. In fact, it comes up twice a year. Once going in to the saga and once coming out. So twice a year. What we're going to talk about is resting dendrobiums. I think personally too much of a fuss is made of this. First of all, let's set some boundaries, yeah? How you approach this subject depends first and foremost on what dendrobiums you've got, yeah? And I'm not giving you a list. That's something you have to find out for yourself. Hopefully you already know. Secondly, is your environment. Now I'm always going on about this. Everybody's environment will vary to one degree or another, from just a little bit to a huge amount, including the other side of the world. Now, in the UK, if you have resting type dendrobiums, they're going into their rest now. The other side of the world, they're coming out. It's, you know, heading into spring. Probably already is spring. So yes, it will depend entirely on that. As a consequence, I will avoid mentioning months, apart from the fact I can't. I'd love to just not mention months so that it became a universal thing, but I can't because it, you know, I need to say where I am. So if you're on the other side of the world, just add 6 months on, or take 6 months off, whichever. It ends up the same place. So yeah. Right, now who requested this? There's a list. I thought there might be. Resting dendrobiums. Originally requested by the Cowa Pinky, whatever that means, I don't want to know. And then backed up by Julie Armstrong, and then finally Nancy Johnson. And if I've missed anybody, sorry. So a multi-requested video. Right, now first of all we have to differentiate. There are true resting type dendrobiums and most of the rest are drier in winter. That's not the same thing, yeah? The true resting dendrobiums come from a place where there is little, almost no rain during that winter period. It is incredibly dry. The moisture for the plants is mainly obtained from mist and fog and occasional rain, but nothing like what they got in the summer, yeah? And you also have to say, what else? Because if you had a period like that in an environment, would it now be called a tropical rainforest? The answer has to be no, doesn't it? To maintain a tropical rainforest, you can't have a long dry period like that. It wouldn't work. Yeah? So tropical rainforests are drier in winter. And this is where we get the differentiation. The true resting type dendrobiums often come from deciduous forests or semi-deciduous forests. And the reason those forests are deciduous is that the trees cannot maintain that sheer volume of leaf cover during the winter period. Like in the UK, deciduous trees dump the lot and go virtually dormant throughout the winter period because they would never have enough daylight, enough warmth, yeah? So that's the sort of two different types. Now, to find out whether your particular dendrobium, if it's a complex hybrid, is a rester, well, good luck with that. However, there are places that you can look up whether your type of dendrobium species is a true resting type dendrobium. And even then, there are fuzzy edges. You can safely say that most of the rest of the dendrobiums, unless you have the ability to maintain your normal growing season temperatures, perhaps a little bit less but not much, if you can do that, then your drier in winter dendrobiums don't need to be as dry in winter, because with the maintenance of the temperature and day lengths, they will keep growing. A little slower perhaps, but they'll keep going. Now, a true resting dendrobium is going to object to that sort of treatment because it's not in its DNA. It expects to have a burst of growth quite quickly in a lot of cases, to be able to mature its canes prior to the circumstances changing such that it can no longer maintain that growth. So it's the environment and its DNA that says, this season is finished, I can now rest. So you need to find out what you've got. Yeah? I now have very few resting type dendrobiums. We have Jenkinsii, just, Lindleyi, sort of, a Phyllum, and not much else that are true resters. A lot of them were lost as part of the move and the change of environments. Nesta would be probably classed as a true rester because of its makeup, because of what's in it. The thing that's quite common with the true resting dendrobiums is their bloom period, and it tends to be late winter, early spring. It tends to be as the season changes, the plant responds. So basically it's as the day lengths get longer and the temperatures start to climb. And there are some environments that some of these dendrobiums come from that have a warm, dry rest at the very end of winter. So the temperatures start to rise, but the rains haven't arrived yet, and they get, sometimes it's only a couple of weeks, but they get a period where the temperatures are going up, but they haven't got their moisture yet. That can be a trigger for some of them. Yeah? So anyway, I'm going to define taking resting type dendrobiums into their rest period. I can't do it by date, because the world doesn't work like that. The world hasn't got a calendar that it ticks off the days on. It doesn't work like that. You can use it as a guideline, yeah? So, in my environment on the south coast of the UK, under normal circumstances, the days are starting to get quite a bit shorter as October progresses, yeah? Many of the resting type dendrobiums will start to respond by slowing down. Some of them may produce their terminal leaf on their canes, which means that cane has finished growing, it will grow no more, ever. Terminal leaf is, it's all in the name, you know, isn't it? Yeah, so that may have happened in October. It may be progressing towards that. It's not a definitive time, but things are slowing down in October. Days getting shorter, temperatures dropping down, nights getting longer, all that sort of stuff. The plant responds. Now, by the time you get to November, most of the resting dendrobiums should be responding, if not responded. In other words, got their terminal leaf. And your idea, the game that we play, is to work with them. So as they start to slow up, what have I always said? What do you feed and water well? Something in active growth. Are we talking about dendrobiums in active growth at the moment? No, we're not. We're talking about plants slowing down to a stop. You need to slow down with them. So as you progress through October, plant dependent, keep your eye on it. If it's still actively growing, well, it's going to want some food and it will need some water, relatively regular. But as the plant slows, you slow with it and reduce the feed gradually. Now you can reduce the amount and not the frequency. You can reduce the frequency and not the amount. You can reduce the amount and the frequency. How you do it doesn't matter. You know, it's not a definitive thing. It's not a science at the end of the day. Nature doesn't turn off the feed because it's Halloween, no more feed. It doesn't work like that, does it? Nothing does in the real world. And you will get late seasons and early seasons. You'll get growing seasons that end later. You know, one of these, what do they call it? Indian summer. You know, where the warmth carries on well into autumn, heading towards the start of winter, all that sort of stuff. So it's not a definitive thing. So you slow down with it. When your dendrobiums have finished growing, canes have matured, by then your feed should have stopped altogether. These are true resting dendrobiums we're on about, not drier in winter. You don't have any more food. They're not growing. What are you feeding? Yeah, it's a logical thing. It's not a, you know, it's not a, oh, this is really weird. It's not. It's just logic. Plants have stopped growing. They don't need any food, and because they're not growing, they need little towards no water. Now, some people I know, quite high up in the YouTube world, in their day, because they don't seem to be around anymore in one particular case, use the calendar. We stop feeding and watering at Halloween and we start again on Valentine's Day. By the book, red line, we stop feeding and watering at Halloween. So it doesn't matter whether the canes have finished growing or not. Well, that's a bit silly, isn't it? Come on. And we start again Valentine's. What if you're in the middle of a big freeze and the weather is appalling? You've got awful freezing cold days and nights that you're battling against. And you're going to start feeding and watering. Do you think your plants will be starting to grow at that point? Don't use the calendar. Use these and this. Yeah. Right, so we're taking them into our resting period, slowly but surely, following the path that the plants want to take until such time as all growth is basically finished. Now, you might have a plant that's quite a few years old. During this time, on the older canes, you might start getting some yellowing leaves. Some of the canes might be going to do autumn, and it can be a bit worrying if it coincides with you stopping the feed and the watering. You think, I'm killing my plant. It's a natural progress. You need to get to know your plant because some plants will hold their leaves more years than others. You're on about true resting types. I forgot my nobly types, but I don't treat those as true resters. I treat them as almost true resters because I haven't got the species Dendrobium nobile, of which there is only one. However, there are hundreds and hundreds of marvellous hybrids. Some of those hybrids have got other types of dendrobiums mixed in them that might not be resting type dendrobiums, which might explain why they don't like to stop growing completely and sometimes might even have new canes pushing up in the middle of winter. Well, what are you going to do with that then? Not feed and water and watch that new cane just shrivel? Or stop halfway and stop growing? No. Use that and these. Yeah. So we've taken our plant into our rest. Now, cut, that's for everybody. Now for me, what I'm doing this year, I've got grow lights. Mine are not going to be allowed to rest unless they really force themselves. So I've got noblies in active growth. Yeah? I'll get a couple. If I can, I'm only picking up stuff I can get at without knocking stuff over, just to make the point. This is a nobly type dendrobium. Yeah? It's doing autumn. Am I panicking? No. Over here, we've got this year's new growths. What are they doing? They're not flipping resting, are they? These are in active growth. My lights are keeping my day length at 12 hours. These are happy. But what goes with that day length? This still needs some feed and still needs reasonably regular watering. The only thing this is that's anti what this plant is trying to do is I haven't got the daytime temperatures it would prefer. But these are cooler growing types of plants. That's not a big deal. The light is more of a big deal and the state that the plant is in. It's growing. If it's growing, keep it going. Don't try and force a plant to rest if it doesn't want to. Well, that's alright, that's the only one I'm getting out. Don't need dozens to demonstrate. If you take the short-leaved ones like the Jenkinsii and Lindleyi, the short stubby types of dendrobiums, their canes are more difficult to see what's going on because they produce a new growth which produces one leaf. And that leaf can be finished in July, August. And the cane might be still swelling a bit. You sort of think, how am I supposed to tell when that's finished growing then? You can't really, yeah, because it only ever produces one leaf. It's not going to grow a big long cane with new leaves coming out all the time. It's got one bulb, cane, and one leaf, and that's it. I mean, I've got a Lindleyi over there that's actually got two leaves on a bulb. Not this year's. This year's lucky to have any at all. Yeah, so sometimes you just have to use some judgment, and with those two in particular, they have a naturally shrivelling look to the canes during the resting period. You need to just look at it and sort of think that's normal. But if it starts becoming abnormal and they really are sort of sucking in and you can see that the life is just leaving them, they need a drop of water. They need to plump up. If you let them go too far, they won't plump up. And then they have lost their ability to store nutrients because they're less than half the size they once were. So again, a bit of logic there. So that's getting your resting type dendrobiums into their rest. Watch the plant and you will get, especially new plants, you bought a nice nobly in bloom in the middle of summer when it shouldn't be, forced, yeah. And then the blooms drop, you've got new growths pushing on and it's November. What are you going to do? Well, just again, use these, use that. Just think, if it's still growing, let it. So chances are it'll come into what I call an out of season nobly. This is one that's lost all track of what time of year it is by being forced with artificial lighting and various other means and devices and devious means in some cases that the mass producers use to get plants out in bloom all year round. It's obvious something mystical's going on because they shouldn't be in bloom all year round. It's not in their natural makeup. Their natural makeup is the nodules, nubbins, whatever you want to call them, that form the buds. Those embryos on the canes, on the noblies for instance, are forming during the rest. You can't see them yet. And then later, as day lengths creep up and everything, they will manifest themselves. And if it's anything like my late winter, early spring I've had, they manifested themselves as kikis in the main this year. That's following on a previous bad year. I've got a feeling there's a relationship. I think a dendrobium that produces a lot of kikis that should have been blooms has had something prior to that it wasn't happy with. And in my case that would have been a total environmental change of moving house, different winters, different temperatures, different light, different everything. And I think the way it objected was, this is so different I might die. A good way of not dying is to produce little plantlets so that when I fall off my perch, so to speak, perhaps these little plants might be able to take root and, you know, survive. Perhaps something like that. Okay, so people that have got resting type dendrobiums, I would say 90% of the people that I've just mentioned have got nobly type dendrobiums, and the chances are they're relatively complex hybrids that have been mass produced. I wouldn't go into any form of panic mode with those. What you need to do is, when the canes have finished growing, hopefully that's at the beginning of winter so that the timing's right, they need to be cooler than they were in the summer for their rest period, and as bright light as you can give them. The trick is keep them shady when they're actively growing in the summer, because they don't need the bright light. So keep them shadier and keep them nice and warm. Then when you get them into their rest period, the change from warm to cooler and from shady to bright light achieves the rest. It achieves sorry, through the doors and through the lounge window and onto the fence over the other side of the driveway. I thought I saw a sparrowhawk, but nah, no such luck. Sorry, I just caught out the corner of my eye because the blinds are open. Right, so warmer and shadier for the growing season, reasonable humidity, keep them going, yeah. Less humidity as you cool them down, or you might start some rot off and some mould, yeah. And the brightest light you can give them relative to the shady growth period that they had. And you've taken them into their rest. And I'm not bringing them out of it now. We can do that as a separate subject. Seeing as it's 3 or 4 months away, yeah, something like that. Right, so there we go, resting dendrobiums. If you've only got nobly type hybrids, then you don't need to be really strict with them. Chances are they'll produce some blooms anyway, but to get the best blooming out of them, do the best you can as far as a rest is concerned. Trick them. Keep them in a warmer, shadier place to grow through the growing season, feed and water well and all that stuff. And then as they go into their rest, brighten them up somehow, move them to a different room. I mean, a nobly type hybrid, once you get into November like now, you can sit that on a south facing window and let it sit in the sun. It won't hurt it, unless it touches the glass. So I've got a cat hair on my mouth, it's driving me up the wall. I'll wring your neck. Cat hair everywhere. I'll get it in a minute. Got it. Right, yeah, so don't panic. Chances are you're nobly types. And if you've got some of the other species that come into this category, then you just got to do your best. And you may get good blooming years, you may get not so good blooming years. You might get good growing years and not so good growing years. If you get a poor growing year for whatever reason, like in my case, taking them off a mount because they were failing and putting them in a pot. So we've had 2 successive poor growing years. Chances of me getting any blooms in the spring, I would say, are 0. So be it. Hopefully next year, because I'll have done a bit better this winter, next year hopefully we get a better growing year. Then the following year we might get some blooms. Yes, nice short-term projects these, aren't they? Keep counting them in years. Anyway, there we go. Now, just before I came out here, I've been waiting since I got up this morning for the rain to stop so that I could film. And it's now heading towards 3 o'clock. so I've had to wait till now. I've got to process this as well. And I'd like some tea at some point. I had a phone call just before I came out here. You remember Hannah came down and we did all the work to get this place ready for my house inspection, and it didn't happen. So I naturally assumed I'd got the date wrong, and it's going to be beginning of December, immediately after the next lot of rent. Rent's due end of November, end of this month. Inspection takes place normally the first or second week after I've paid my rent. Every second time, it's every 6 months. And I assumed I got the date wrong. Well, the lady phoned up, and she's been quite seriously ill and has been off work a lot, followed by her daughter not being too clever and had to take more time off work. So she's all behind. So I did actually get the date wrong. Right. And she just hasn't been able to do it. So my house inspection is now next Tuesday morning. So Sunday and Monday I will potter around just making sure everything's tidy, you know, run the hoover around, you know, all that sort of stuff. Just making sure, because we did there's nothing to do in the garden apart from sweep up. All I need to do to make the garden look tidy is sweep the leaves up. That's it. So half an hour with the broom, pick them up, put them in a bag, tidy. And unless it's chucking it down with rain, I will do that on Monday so that we don't get too many trees come down overnight, leaves come down overnight and make it bad again. As I said, we've already done most of the work. So yeah, my house inspector has been pretty ill and has consequently not been doing the job. I mean, I thought perhaps she'd left the company and they hadn't got a replacement or something. All sorts of things spring to mind, but it was nothing more than she hasn't been capable of doing the job. She's now back up and running and will be around Tuesday morning. So be it. Get that over and done with. Yes, at the end of this month when I pay my rent, it'll be 2 years. My 2 year, you know, end of my 2 year period. The lady next door, she said, have you got any plans on moving out? I said, they can carry me out in a box or I'll have to get kicked out, otherwise I'm staying. That's the plan. You know, things do change obviously, but that's the plan. And yeah, so Resting Dendrobiums, it's made, I believe it's made too much of a big deal. It is a relatively simplistic thing. What? Noisy cat. It's a relatively simplistic thing based on following nature's way in the environment they come from, where they get a much drier period in winter. It's cooler. As a consequence, a lot of the trees are dumping their leaves, so it's brighter. There's more light coming in. Now, on some days, there's less light because it's all misty and foggy, because you've had so much wet during the growing season, yeah, with warmth, that when those rains stop, it's not suddenly dry everywhere, is it? You know what it's like here, you know, in the UK. If we have a lot of rain, the next day, what happens in the morning? It's foggy, isn't it? Misty and murky. Yeah, as all that moisture's trying to evaporate. So you're just following nature's way, and that's all it is. The downside I've got here in the south coast of the UK is without artificially intervening, I can't maintain the day lengths. Yeah. Therefore, when I say nice and bright during the day for the resting dendrobiums, the day's too short sometimes to trigger that effect. So the bloomings may not be as good as they could be simply because the light isn't there. Yeah. We do what we can. Just kick the bucket, so to speak. Yeah, so anyway, these are going to be regular videos. Every Wednesday we will pick on another one. Some will be, you know, reasonably short, just a quick sort of chat about something. Some will be more long-winded. They will vary considerably, and as I said, any ideas that come in that duplicate, I will add the name to the subject like I did with this one. Rather than add a new item to the list, I'll just add the name so that we get the person who suggested it. And yeah, if you've got resting type dendrobiums, just don't lose sleep over it. It's not worth it. Just consider you've come out of the growing season, you've tricked them a little bit by keeping them a bit shadier than perhaps they would like, but they still grow because they're in active growth, they're pushing on, and you've kept them fed and watered to keep them going all through, and then as they come to the end of that growth period, you slow down with them till you get to that stop point. Yeah, whatever that is. It'll be different for different types of dendrobiums, but certainly with the longer cane type dendrobiums, there will be the terminal leaf. It's very distinctive. I can't see one that I can grab hold of nearby without knocking a load of stuff over. But yeah, it is pretty obvious. It's leaves come out alternatively, and then you get one that doesn't quite keel over as much as the others have. It's sort of not quite. Sometimes it can be quite upright. Normally smaller, and nothing at the base of it, no signs of another leaf coming. As these leaves progress and the canes grow, as a leaf pushes on, the next one's there, you can see it. So as this one gets to completion, this one's starting. The terminal leaf has got nothing at the base. They are quite obvious. And if it's some of these dumpy little canes that have only got one leaf, well, you just have to do the best you can. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.